In accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, PL 1975, announcement, I wish to announce that the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of the public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the School District of the Chatham's Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted in the Board Administrative Office, sent to the clerks of the Chatham Borough and the Chatham Township, the Library of the Chathams, the Chatham Courier, the Daily Record, the Star Ledger, the Independent Press, and the TAP. Mr. Arnick. Ms. Chambers. Ms. Ciccarelli.
Here.
Ms. Clark.
Here.
Ms. Kenny.
Here.
Mr. Gilfillan. Mr. Ryan. Here. Mr. Valenti. And Ms. Weber. If all would stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, if possible. The flag is at that end of the Media Center. I pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this point, I would like to go ahead and swear in or have the recently elected board candidates take their pledge of oath, please. So
In the United States and this state,
under the authority of the people.
under the authority of the people,
So help me God.
so help me God.
I
I, Ann Ciccarelli,
do
do solemnly affirm
that I possess the qualifications
that I possess the qualifications
prescribed by law
prescribed by law
for the office of a member of the Board of Education.
for the office of a member of the Board of Education.
I am not disqualified as a voter
I'm not disqualified as a voter
pursuant to RS 19:4-1.
pursuant to RS 19:4-1,
And that I will faithfully,
and that I will faithfully,
impartially,
and justly
perform all the duties of that office
perform all the duties of that office
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability,
So help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations, you're now
Thank you.
all official for the next 3 years.
2 more years.
What's next, Peter?
At this point, I will open the floor to a motion for a candidate of the members to be for president for next year, for a Board of Education president.
I would like to nominate Jill Weber for president.
I would like to second that nomination.
Any other nominations?
I like this.
All right. Jill Weber for president. Mr. Miss-
Can I take the meeting back? Because it's taking too long.
Mr. Well, if everybody'd stop you. If everybody would behave better. Mr. Arnick. Ms. Chambers.
Yes.
Ms. Ciccarelli.
Yes.
Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Ms. Kenny.
Yes.
Mr. Gilfillan. Mr. Ryan. Mr. Valenti. And Ms. Weber.
Yes.
Congratulations, and you can have your...
Thank you. Can I take over the meeting now?
All yours.
I was born in Newark. We talk a little faster than you. So I'm going to nominate Mr. Gilfillan for vice president.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Against? There we go. Done. Peter, are we good with the housekeeping?
Yes, if you want to make any president comments and ready to roll.
I do not, thank
Okay.
you. We did the Pledge of Allegiance, nominations. I do not have any.
We're up to Mike.
We're up to Mike. Very good. Okay, Dr. LaSousa, passing the baton over to you for your superintendent report.
Thank you, Ms. Weber. Happy 2019. As all of you know, but maybe not everyone in the audience knows, on New Year's Eve, the State Superior Court of New Jersey released an opinion invalidating the current graduation requirements for current high schoolers that had been written into Regulation 6A. So I don't know how deeply you want me to dive into this, but essentially this is impactful to our students, at least potentially. And we've had a couple of presentations in the last 2 or 3 months that touched on Park and high school graduation requirements in some way. The first was the annual testing report that Ms. Chase gave in October, and the second was at our very last meeting, we had a report of the graduates that Doug Walker, assistant principal at the high school, delivered. And in between that time frame, the curriculum committee had met, and actually Sean Devine, who is our director of secondary education, discussed what he was looking at with respect to Park as it stands as a high school graduation requirement, and specifically Park as compared to some of the other assessments that our students take, like the ACT and the SAT. So we had decided before the break that we would invite Mr. Devine in tonight to talk a little bit about Park at the high school level only. And then in between that time, what happened, of course, was that the court decided that the current graduation requirements don't stand. So just I'm going to turn it over to Sean. Before I do that, what essentially was at issue here in this case was that for a couple of decades now, the state of New Jersey has had a statute, a law. Education in New Jersey, public education is governed in part by Title 18A. Those are laws, so enacted by the legislature and the governor. And one of these requirements, decades old, is that students must take an exit exam in their 11th grade year of high school in order to receive a New Jersey endorsed diploma. And it's worth noting that there are only about 15 states in the country that require some kind of test as a condition of graduation from high school. New Jersey is one of them. And the law, 18A, specifically states that that test must be given in the junior year. Students must have more than one opportunity to pass it. If they don't pass it, and if they still aren't able to pass it after multiple attempts, must have an alternative way to graduate. Several years ago, when the state was transitioning away from HESPA, which had been the state required test, and to Park, the Department of Education changed its practice and its requirement for school districts and moved away from a single test in 11th grade and instead went to end of course assessments at the end of pretty much 9th grade, 10th grade, and 11th grade. And as you all remember, there was quite a pushback against that process, and we had many students who refused to take the tests. And the state, as part of its transition plan, allowed students to meet the graduation requirement by not having to take those tests, but instead scoring a certain score on either the PSAT or the Aspire or the SAT or the ACT. Since 2016, the state has attempted to phase in the Park end-of-course assessments as requirements for graduation. And in 2016, laid out a plan whereby students couldn't access the passing score that had previously been acceptable on the ACT, PSAT, Aspire, or PSAT, unless they had sat for all of the Park tests that the state had laid out. So the court, that is what the court found to be unacceptable and in violation of Title 18A. We have 18A in education, those are the laws. Then we have 6A, those are the regulations enacted by the Board of Education, State Board of Education, and then we have guidance from the DOE. So essentially the court determined that what the State Board of Education had established in 6A was contradictory to the intent of the legislature in 18A, because instead of one test in 11th grade, there were now 3 tests in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. Instead of one test that students could retake if they failed, there were now all of these tests, 3 in each grade, 2 in each grade level, that students had to sit for before they could retake or take an alternative. So the court invalidated what the requirements are for our current students, particularly our juniors, sophomores, and freshmen. So at this point now, we've been told by the department as of about a week ago that we need to sit tight, continue to carry forward with the assessment program until they issue us further guidance and further direction on what they are going to do to satisfy the court, or if they're going to challenge the court's opinion, which they can only do in the state Supreme Court. So we're sitting in limbo now, and we'll see what the department tells us next based on what the court decision was. So that's the backdrop. Even before that happened, though, we were inviting Mr. Devine in to speak about Park. Mr. Devine is our Director of Secondary Education. We have 2 administrative positions in the district that straddle multiple school buildings and multiple academic departments. So at the elementary level, for example, we have someone named Kathleen O'Connor, who some of you have met. So she works with all 3 elementary K3 schools, as well as Lafayette Avenue School, to make sure that we're consistent in our program and what's happening. And she works across disciplines for the same purpose, to make sure that we're not working in silos and, you know, we're all collaborating. Mr. Devine does something similar between the middle school and the high school, and he is someone who's heavily involved in the testing program, the state testing program. So he, along with Doug Walker, are really chiefly responsible for ensuring that our students make the graduation requirement. And they've had a tough task the last couple of years because there have been so many changes and so many variations in what the Department of Education has told us satisfies the graduation requirement. So I'm going to turn it over to Sean. I'll have a few other things to add once he's finished, and you can ask away as he shows you what he's going to show you. And that one should work.
All right. Thank you, Dr. LaSousa. And thank you to the board members for letting me speak tonight. As you can see from the opening slide, my position is that the PARCC test does our students a disservice, and given the recent judgment in the court ruling that struck it down, I hope that New Jersey will consider finding a different graduation test if they have to give a graduation test at all. But a little background: in March 2015, that was the last time New Jersey gave a HESPA test, and in the intervening years between then and now, they decided, instead of giving one test in this transitional period, we'll give a bunch of different tests that we'll allow. You could pass the ELA by taking 3 different PARCC tests. They accepted SAT, they accepted PSAT, ACT, a lot of standardized tests that are normally taken by students. They did the same with the math. But this was supposed to end by 2020, when students had to take the full complement of PARCC tests. And by 2021, the PARCC test would be the only test that would be acceptable. In 2018, New Jersey ended its association with PARCC and transitioned to a rebranding that they called NJSLA. So they're still using the same vendor. Those tests, I believe, will still be similar to the PARCC tests, except they may be a little bit shorter in duration, although I'm sure that'll be up in the air now with the this present court ruling. All right, so what I thought was that if we had this little transitional period of time when the state accepted a multiple of tests for graduation. And my belief was that it offered a nice little experiment where if the PARCC tests were truly valid measurements of what the students understood, then our students' performance on those tests should be similar to what their performance is on other tests that they've been taking for many years, such as the SAT, the ACT, the PSAT, and other standardized tests. And so when I started to look at the data, what these charts represent is on the bottom is the scale for that particular test, and on the left-hand side is just the number of students who reached a particular score. In the center of the graph somewhere, you'll see that magenta line. It's called the cut score. The cut score is what New Jersey has deemed the passing score if you're going to use that particular test as the graduation requirement. So on the ELA 9 score, or the ELA 9 test, you had to achieve a score of 750. These particular graphs only apply for last year's graduating class, all right? But you can see that the students in last year's graduating class, roughly about somewhere between a quarter and a third, did not pass and are on the left-hand side of the graph. And you know, the about 3/4 to 2/3 did pass and are on the right-hand side. Similar results for the ELA 10 exam. But then as we transition to some of those other exams that could be used for graduation during this time that those students took, this is the PSAT reading scores. These are the Aspire scores. These are the SAT reading. And these are the ACT scores. And you can see our students did very well with the ACT. On the math, you see a similar trend. Now notice for the geometry, the cut score is lower, so the pink line is moved a little bit to the left. And that was the only test that particular class took from the PARCC in any great numbers. But as you look at the PSAT, the Aspire scores, the SAT math scores, the ACT math scores, our students routinely do well, exceedingly well, on the standardized tests that they take. And so what I did was I looked at, you know, expanding the numbers a little bit. And so on the left-hand side, I went through all of the students who have taken PARCC exams since they started to be administered in 2016. So from 2016 till our current freshmen who took the algebra exams last year as 8th graders, if you tabulate all of the percentages of students who met the various cut scores, you can see that on the graph on the left. The two scores that are highlighted were the ones that New Jersey had deemed to be the two exams that they were going to use as the graduation requirements, the ELA 10 test, which about 70% of our students passed, and the Algebra 1 tests that about 76% of our students passed during those times. Now contrast that with the table on the right-hand side that shows the percentages of our students meeting the state mandated cut score for the SAT reading and math, the ACT reading and math. Right, those scores, the number of our students that met those cut scores are substantially higher. This is the statewide number of students who have met the proficiency or the cut score for these various tests. Now, you know, the makers of the exam will note that, you know, it increases every year. However, the passing rate is far below New Jersey's current graduation percentage, which is, I believe, around 90% currently. And one last thing that I did was I tried to look at how this sort of correlated with college acceptance. And so on the left-hand side, there's a scale from 0 to 100. And what I did was I went through every college and I noted the acceptance rate. So if it had a 50% acceptance rate, I took 100, I minus 50. If it had a 75% acceptance rate, I took 100 minus the 75. I'm sorry, minus the percentage of students who didn't get in. So if you had a high acceptance, your selectivity was, 75. If you accepted 30% of students, then the selectivity came out to be about 70%. Right, so the trend kind of in this graph shows that the ACT combined math and ELA scores don't really correlate all that well. So this shows that those tests really don't matter all that much when the schools, the colleges, are selecting our students. Same with the SAT, a little bit better. The combined exams that the state wants to use for its graduation requirement, the ELA 9 and the geometry. And then I contrast it against the GPA, the students who got selected to the various colleges, and it's a little bit better. All right, to me, what these collection of graphs just show is that any one test does not matter as much as the classroom instruction. All right, so the colleges that are selecting our students don't deem their performance on these individual tests as important as their work in the classroom. All right, and by next year's graduating class, the class of 2020, if the current law was to continue and the current requirements for graduation were to continue, they would have to take all of the PARCC tests and reach a state-mandated cut score in order to graduate, number one. And then if they didn't meet a cut score for the ELA 10 or the Algebra 1 exam, if they hadn't taken all of the PARCC tests, then all of those other tests would not be accessible to them. They wouldn't be able to use those as alternatives. Right? And my feeling is that as a measure of students' students' understanding of the material, as their preparedness for college, the PARCC tests are not as good a measure as the ones that the students have traditionally been taking, the SAT, the ACT, the other standardized tests. And no test gives as good a picture of a student's understanding of their learning as the GPA and their work in the classroom. And if you look at the impact that PARCC has on the daily instruction, with the amount of time that it takes the students out of the classroom and the disruption of the PARCC test on the daily schedule of the school and the operation of the school, it just lends credence to the fact that, in my opinion, and especially in this time when it's sort of in flux in terms of what tests the state of New Jersey will use for determining college graduation, that this is a time when we really need to let the state hear that the PARCC tests do not measure up, that are not helping our students achieve the college readiness, and if that they have to give a test to satisfy or to say that they've as a graduation requirement, then that test should be something like the SAT or the ACT that the students can also use in their applications to colleges. All right, thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Devine?
One second.
I have one quick question. On one of the slides, you showed the benchmark for PARC with only like in 2015, it was like a 37% pass rate and going up. Do we have that data statewide to compare against with SAT and ACT? What are the, if you look at just say a cut score of 16 on the ACT, what percentage of students in the state of New Jersey, not just here in Chatham, does state have that information or meeting that?
This statewide, I'm not sure. That would be tough to get. I don't know that they report it.
I know we can collect that data here, but I think obviously we're concerned about
Right.
our little island here.
Right,
in Chatham,
sure.
but this is a statewide problem. We need, this push needs to help everybody, not just us.
Yeah, just real quick. This is picking up right off from last board meeting when we had Doug Walker here. But the kids who just graduated from Chatham High School, class of 2018, they fall into three buckets when they were in 9th grade. They either took ELA, PARC, and failed it, took ELA, PARC, and passed it, or they refused to take ELA, PARC. So I was just curious, those three categories of kids who failed, kids who passed, kids who refused, what did they look like in terms of their college options or college plans? So these are the students who failed. 97% of them ended up going to four-year schools. The kids who passed, 99% went to four-year schools. And the kids who refused, 93% went to four-year schools. So not a huge difference, and certainly not the house is on fire if you failed ELA PARC in 9th grade. And then in terms of where they went to school, using those same categories that we were talking about at the last meeting, these are for the students who failed PARC ELA 9. These are the students who passed PARC ELA 9. And then these are the students who refused PARC ELA 9. So, whether you passed, you failed, or you just refused, most kids ended up going to some kind of a college, some kind of a good college, a place hopefully that they're happy right now. But it gets back to Sean's point of whether PARC ELA 9 or ELA 10 or Algebra 1, any of those tests in that suite really should be used in this way to determine if kids are ready for college, because it doesn't look like it based on the data that we have.
And this is, I kind of know the answers to these, so I'm kind of leading with these questions, if you will, so indulge me. Who is the company that makes these PARC tests? Pearson. Has anyone checked to see who Pearson donates money to in the New Jersey legislature?
I have not done that.
I'm sorry. This is how the sausage is made, right? So you wrote a really good letter making our feelings about the PARC testing known to our legislators. Is there some, would you have appropriate people in the legislature that perhaps Chatham parents could write to let them know the same? Because this court ruling is nice, but what if it changes? What if it's overturned? The amount of time we're spending adjusting schedules, taking kids out of instruction for these PARC tests, it's a drain on the administration and the teachers. So
we do have representatives here who represent us in Chatham, and I think they've been receptive to whatever feedback we give them about this or anything else.
do you think it's a good idea that parents contact our legislators direct?
I always think that's a good idea.
All right, I do too. All right, thank you.
Mike, I was happy to see a draft of a resolution that you came across at the last board meeting. I encouraged our board members to think about possibly as a board coming together and collectively drafting a resolution prior to this, court ruling, to express our dissatisfaction with PARC as a high school requirement, graduation requirement. We are in a high-performing district. Our kids take the ACT, they take the SAT, they take the PSAT, they take the pre-ACT. We have enough testing data to support the abilities of the students we have, and we have resources to support those that cannot meet those expectations. We're being put in a situation continually for the state to even say, we'll get back to you. Well, look what happened the last time they said they'd get back to us. And we had to have delayed openings for 200 and something students to sit and take a test now that may not even,
3 days.
3 days, that impacts the instructional programs of 1,100 kids. I think we need to be proactive on our end and put out, we can only, we as a board can write a resolution, we can say we do not support this as a graduation requirement, and we have the data to show where our kids perform. We just saw it. Our kids are ready to graduate from high school. They should not have to go through this continually. It's a lot of stress on them, their families, on our school, on our administration, and I think I'm not saying that this particular draft should be, this resolution should be the one, but something similar, and I think we should act sooner than later. It's in the press now. It's something we have been talking about here, and I think it's time for us at policy or wherever this would come out of to take a closer look and take some action as a board, to let our dissatisfaction and frustration be known.
And we could bring this resolution up.
So, excuse me. Just so I understand, because I really don't, quite frankly, while we're in the holding pattern here, what is our posture as a district? What are we doing? Do we continue the old process until we have a legal ruling that gives us clearer guidance? I just want to understand very succinctly and clearly what we are now doing. Because we can't talk about options until we understand collectively where we are, right? That's
Sure. Well, first important distinction is this court ruling and what we are talking about tonight is about the high school graduation requirement. So the window for Park Administration or New Jersey Student Learning Assessment Administration, accessible via the Pearson website and produced by Pearson, even though they're called New Jersey Student Learning Assessments now, is coming up this spring. At the elementary and middle school level, we absolutely have to administer those tests, just like we always have. This court case had nothing to do with anything below the high school graduation requirement level. At the high school level, our next planned administration, if I'm not mistaken, is in April. And as of today, we would be administering that assessment because as of today, the regulations are published as they are published and nothing has changed in light of the court decision. The court put a stay in the decision for 30 days to give the Department of Education time to either appeal it to the state Supreme Court or come up with a different set of rules to support
so the bottom line is
the statute.
We have time.
We do have
We
some
don't
time.
have to make any decisions in the interim until the court rules definitively.
True.
Right? Is that the case?
Yes.
Okay. So there's no interim decision that has to be made here. Is that correct?
Correct, except unless we want our voice to be heard by more folks in terms of our displeasure with what's
I just want to
happening.
understand clearly. So there's no interim decision that has to be made. So there's no collective action that we have to take to address this situation so that it's not time sensitive. That's correct? Okay, so we're talking about how to bring public attention to this issue so that we have clear guidance from the state so we could move forward in a logical manner so our business as a board in the district is not interrupted. That's my understanding, right? Because it's taxing us from a manpower level, from a woman power level, from an administrative level to be able to keep up with the constant changes while they're trying to decide what they want to do. Okay. I understand. Yeah, I'm a simple guy from Jersey City, so I really want to understand really what the issue is, if there's a crisis, what that crisis is, and now we could talk about solutions, right, or possible solutions.
Sure, let me just clarify that a little bit, though.
Sure, certainly.
So I think everything
thank
that
you. That's helpful.
Everything you said is accurate.
Okay.
My concern, though, isn't that we need the state to be more clear in its guidance to us or that our staff members are taxed in the administration of the test. My concern is more, is this requirement good for kids? And is it consistent with what we see our kids able to do and what they're able to demonstrate when they take assessments, not designed by us, not even classroom assessments, these other assessments that are out there in the world that help determine whether they gain entry into college or they pursue some other, career or endeavor. And I don't think that the current graduation requirement or set of requirements is good for kids. That's the concern. So the purpose of the resolution for me would be less to impress upon the DOE that they need to be clearer or more proactive in what they communicate. It's more to influence what future students should be required to demonstrate when they graduate so that they're not put through a rigmarole that really doesn't have very much validity from our perspective.
Oh, that's helpful. And so my question to you, Mike, would be, when you have an issue like this, as a matter of routine, what do you and the other superintendents in the state do to address this issue at a statewide level in Trenton? If this was another issue and you were trying to gain this attention, what alternatives would you have to, get the attention of the people in the state and, the legislators in Trenton?
So I'm active in some organizations that engage legislators directly and meet with them directly on issues. Some of us testify when the state board holds an opportunity for testimony or one of the committees in the legislature does. So I have colleagues that are doing that kind of thing. We've also written to legislators or met with them about this particular issue.
Do you find that your colleagues and peers feel the same way, that this test is not indicative of what students understand to move forward? Is that, or is it?
Many of my colleagues feel that way.
Okay, so that's it's the prevailing wisdom of your peers. Is that a fair statement or no?
I don't want to speak for all of my
right,
peers,
but
of course,
it's never going to be across the board. So perhaps some boards of education have to band together and go to Trenton and have our voice heard together. From different districts. Maybe if 50 people from different boards of education show up at a meeting in Trenton that has this on the agenda, maybe that's what it's going to take. I mean, I don't. Again, not to be sound radical, but quite frankly, we'd be having the same conversation 10 years from now if we wait for things to happen in Trenton. In my experience, no, that I understand it, and thank you for your clear outline of it. But I wanted to make sure that I clearly understood it, and so I guess where we are is our next course is, right, what do we do to bring attention to this and do what's best for the students, which, as is always your aim. But that would be my suggestion, and I'm open to any suggestions that are logical and reasonable to try to get our legislators' attention in Trenton, because this is ridiculous. Yeah, I'm going to sound jaded. I don't think that Trenton does not. I think Trenton has a very good idea. I don't think Trenton cares to hear expert testimony whether the test is good or not. I think they need to hear from voters more than they do from expert. I agree with you, and that's my point. Right? They need to hear that people are not happy, and have our collective opinion heard, as opposed to keep getting it trampled on, and having us to dance around this issue and pivot left and pivot right, and let's get some action here and definitive voice, and understand what the issue is. This is a little absurd, quite frankly, in my mind. Agreed.
Tremendous waste of resources.
It's a waste. It's a waste of everybody's time here. I know.
Sorry, Mary, did you?
I do have one thing. When you were speaking, Sean, did I understand? I wrote this down because I want to make sure that I was asked the question properly. Did you say that the class of 2020 has to take every park assessment right now? They have to take every park assessment, and whether or not they meet the cutoff or not, as long as they pass the alternatives, they can still graduate high school? Is that my understanding?
So With the current class of 2019, just as in prior classes, they can use any of those other alternative tests in lieu of the two that they've selected, ELA 10 or the Algebra 1. But starting next year with the class of 2020, which was the rationale behind our having the juniors this year take the ELA 10 test that they should have taken the previous year, was that they cannot use the alternative tests unless they have taken all of the PARCC tests. And the current regulation, I think, for those students would be ELA 9, ELA 10, and I believe ELA 11 will be eliminated, and then they have to take 2 tests that are math tests, whether those are Algebra 1 and Geometry or Geometry and Algebra 2, depends on the student. But starting next year, if they haven't taken 2 math and 2 ELA PARCCs, they're not able to use the alternative tests such as the SAT or the ACT.
So they could take all 4 tests and get like a 759, just 1 point below the cutoff.
49, right? Yeah.
Take all 4 tests and then sit for the SAT or the ACT and get a perfectly fine grade on that, and that could substitute just because they sat for the tests?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So I just want to make sure I understood that. So
right.
these children are being forced to take tests, whether
right.
or not they pass them, because
right.
I think this is a huge testament to our teachers and what is going on in our classrooms, because look at the success our children are having on the ACTs and the SATs. And I will say from the time I was sworn in last year, Michelle has been saying we should get together with other school boards, and I think the steps we've taken to get here, 100% behind that, Michelle. I think it was brilliant.
And what was even more ridiculous was that one of the alternative tests is the ELA 9 test on the ELA side. So the students didn't even, a lot of our students who had passed the ELA 9 opted out of the ELA 10, but the ELA 9 test was not valid unless they took the ELA 10. So a lot of them had already passed a PARCC test, would meet the state requirement for graduation, except the only part that they hadn't met yet was sitting and producing a valid score, no matter what that number turned out to be, on the ELA 10 test that they were required to take, which caused a lot of disruption to our
Right.
academic program earlier in the year, which was part of the frustration of the administration.
Right. Was compensated more for just people taking the test.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
I don't know,
There's a process to select a vendor, and there's a contract, and the contract is multi-year and all of that. So I don't know about any of that. And the other thing that is absolutely worth mentioning is that the current Commissioner of Education recommended changes to everything we're talking about this summer, and they were passed upon by the State Department, the State Board of Education. So we have a receptive ear in the commissioner's seat in terms of this. The current commissioner recommended a number of changes that would have avoided exactly what Mary's pinpointing right now about having to sit for all the tests and everything else.
I think another thing, Mike, that you mentioned in the letter you shared with us, which is really relevant, if, let's just say, the ACT, SAT, PSAT, or another testing tool was used as a statewide, it would perhaps open avenues to students who may not necessarily ever be able to take, just financially, not be able to pay for or take the ACT, SAT, or not have access to it, to take a test that they wouldn't necessarily take, that could actually be useful for them, that might open up doors that could possibly not have been opened before. And we just assume, due to our zip code, our kids take the SAT, ACT. They take them because 96% of our students go on to college, where that doesn't happen everywhere across the state. So this push would really be a beneficial one for a lot of kids, not just here in Chatham.
Rather talk about
More to
parking
follow
than
on
yes,
park.
I'm like-
We could talk about this resolution in board business or in policy. Anything else, Dr. LaSousa?
Nothing else on my end, I don't think.
Nothing else. Okay, in the interest of time, we're going to switch over to the administrator's report. Mr. Tequila?
Sure, just quickly need to backpedal.
Thank you, Mr. Devine.
And just to take a quick motion for the reorg items V1 and V2, which is approving all of the actions that were done in May, and then approving the new board committee list that's on file in the superintendent's office.
Okay.
So moved. Anybody? Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any oppositions? Motion passes 9-0. Just quickly, I'm very pleased to announce that the temporary certificate of occupancy for the new administration building was issued on January 3rd. The central office will be moving this Thursday and Friday, the 10th and 11th. The items on the punch list are still being corrected, so the contractor will be doing some work while we're in there. If you come into the current board office, it's a sea of orange crates, because a lot of the current office is packed, and it seems that everybody's eager to be relocated and to our new location. For the middle school auditorium, the project was advertised on January 4th, and the bids for that will be opened on January 30th. Unless there's any question, that's all I have for the business administrator report.
I just didn't hear you. January 30th for the bids
Yes.
opening? Okay, fingers crossed that they come in low. Okay, any questions for Peter on any of those items? No? Just real quick before the committee reports, I just want to thank Luke, Mason, and Jillian, our students that are videoing and on sound over here. Thank you. I appreciate you all coming out. See, we're very sensitive to your time and park and testing, so thank you. And Alabama football. Moving over quickly to personnel, Ms. Kenny.
We have not met since the last meeting.
Excellent. Curriculum, Mrs. Ciccarelli.
We have not either. I believe we're set to meet on the 11th of February.
Okay, perfect. Finance and facilities, Mr. Gilfillan.
Does this work? Sean?
They
We actually just met. You'll all be glad to know that we have a continued discussion about full-day kindergarten, at least an option for full-day kindergarten. And on February the 4th, you will have in front of you a opportunity to discuss and vote on a opportunity for a limited full-day kindergarten at a cost for next year. So we discussed the summary, the timeline, the costs, all the other open questions, etc. For once again a pilot program for full-day kindergarten at a fee in 2019-2020. And that's all she wrote. We meet again probably in a month. So February 4th should be a
February
standing
4th
room
we'll have,
only.
we'll have all our questions answered.
You'll have all your answers. You'll have
And does it
everything
look
ready
like
to go.
one section or unknown?
One section.
One section.
Yes.
Excellent. Well,
So I expect 300 people at the next meeting.
That we just want to work through with registration happening over the next 3 weeks is the number of kindergarten students that we register for our normal program, and then we can make final decisions about, no pilot at all, one section, more than one section. If there's any surprises in the registration, that could influence what the path forward would be.
okay.
But registration begins next Monday, the 14th, and goes for about 2 weeks for kindergarten. Then we roll into first grade. And then, of course, people can register all the way up, until the year begins. But that's when the bulk of our registrations occur.
Okay. But you still have, that you get some in September.
Yes.
Okay. So you'll leave some buffer. Okay, very good. Policy and planning, Mr. Arnott.
We have not met since the last meeting. We'll meet within a month.
Okay, moving over to the liaison reports. I do not have anything from the borough. Ms. Clark.
Nothing from the township.
Athletic boosters. I didn't meet. I was going to say, is Carol here?
Carol, anything?
She is here.
Anything we need to know, Carol?
Meeting is tomorrow. Very good. Thank you.
Perfect.
Performing arts, Mr. Arnott.
Sure. Wednesday night, 7:30 at the Performing Arts Center. Brian Conti will start off the winter concerts. The Chatham High School bands we'll conclude our winter concert season, and that should be a great performance. We want to also congratulate an 8th grader, Jenna Hauser, for successfully auditioning into the Morris County Honors Choir. And finally, we have a very exciting opportunity coming up next Monday, January 14th, for our choral and theater students. Tony Award nominee Adam Pascal from the original Broadway cast of Rent will be coming to Chatham High School for 4 hours to give a master class, a Q&A, and a short performance between 11:30 and 3:30. This is a really exciting. This is really exciting for the students and for the staff, the Performing Arts Department, and they would all like to thank the Performing Arts boosters, the PTO, and the Board of Ed for their support and allowing them to make this opportunity for the students come to fruition.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you, Sal. Chatham Education Foundation, Ms. Kenny, thank you for the chocolate.
Yes, I do not have any updates at this point.
Okay. Except for the chocolate from the Chatham Education Foundation. What? Chatham Rec? Nothing. And PTO District Cabinet, have they met?
We met last week.
Anything of note?
I don't think there was anything super significant to discuss.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. Then I make a motion to pass the public and executive session minutes for December 17th, 2018. Any abstentions? Peter, are we all? Oh, okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? There we go.
Noted, minutes past 9-0.
Excellent. Very good. We have our first opportunity for public commentary. Hearing the citizens during the public commentary section of the agenda is an opportunity for any member of the public to be heard about issues which are or are not topics scheduled for the current meeting. To help facilitate an orderly meeting and to permit all to be heard, speakers are asked to limit their comments to a reasonable length of time. And just a reminder, it's not an opportunity for a back and forth, but an opportunity for you to state your comments, questions, compliments. Nope. Seeing no comments. Okay. Well, we have another opportunity at the end, so we're going to move over to the action items. Personnel first, Ms. Kenny.
Yes, I'd like to move action items A1 to A14 on the main agenda and items 15, 17 on the addendum. And then please note the changes to A2 and A3 on the addendum.
A2 and A3. Okay, got it. Any questions on personnel for Ms. Grand or Dr. LaSousa? And just a reminder, the agendas are posted Friday afternoon, so we look at them over the weekend. The only items that we may not have advance notice are any addendums. No additional questions? Everybody's good? Peter?
Agenda items A1 to A14 with the addendum of A2, A3, A15, A16, and A17. Mr. Gilfillan? Yes. Mr. Arnick? Yes. Ms. Chambers? Yes. Ms. Ciccarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan? Yes. Mr. Valenti? Yes. And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Passed 9-0.
Great. Mr. Gilfillan, Finance and Facilities?
Yes, I'd like to move action items B1 to B12 on your regular agenda. A couple of thank yous. A donation from the Chatham Performing Arts Boosters, the amount of $7,000 for the rental of spring musical set design, and then the 4-hour masterclass with Adam Pascal, which should be awesome.
Nice.
It's kind of cheap. I mean, that guy is. High school PTO in the amount of $2,000 toward the music department. Again, here it all adds up for the 4-hour masterclass guest speaker performer Adam Pascal. And then last but not least, from the Washington Avenue PTO, a donation of $1,000 for the purchase of chimes for the school. Is that when you're getting caught coming in late? Like the chimes in my house growing up?
You had chimes? We had a wooden spoon in my house.
Well, the wooden spoon came after the chimes started going off, sneaking in the house.
Any questions on any of those items? No, Peter?
Sure. Agenda items B1 through B12. Mr. Gilfillan?
Yes.
Mr. Arnick? Yes. Ms. Chambers?
Yes.
Ms. Ciccarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Valenti? Yes. And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda items passed 9-0.
Thank you. Mrs. Ciccarelli, would you move the two items that we can't have any discussion on?
Yes.
Oh, you did. There we go. Well, we can't have any discussion, so all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
Pass 9-0.
Very good, thank you. And Mr. Arnott, over to you for policy.
I'd like to move item D1 to public vote.
Second?
Any questions on that? We've been doing this for several years now. Again, random canine searches. Sheriff's Department comes in. It's usually announced or not announced. It's a good deterrent. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Pass 9-0.
There you go, Peter. Just quickly on board business, we have two items. One, we talked about park. There's a draft resolution. Michelle, is this something you want to take action on tonight, or did you want to
No, I think,
table that for policy? Not table it, but
no, I was so happy to see it, and I think it's something we all need to take a look at, and also I think it's through policy to take a close look at it and make sure
Okay.
everyone's on board and make sure the language reflects what we believe to be true here from Chatham, and then, but if, we're looking out to March for our next policy meeting, maybe we
Okay.
want to do it sooner than later.
Sal, would you mind queuing that up at your policy meeting and then making a recommendation for any changes? I mean, I think we're all on the same page that this is a colossal waste of resources and not a valid test. I know Dr. LaSousa's immediate concern is high school graduation. I think it's a waste of resources through the district. To continue to even do it in third grade I understand, Mike, your concern is the graduation requirement, but I see no validity throughout the district for it. But if you don't mind, Sal, would you take that mantle up in policy?
I shall.
There's a federal testing requirement for
A
the other
testing,
grades.
but not park.
That's true.
It doesn't have to be park.
That's true.
That produces results like that are so skewed from national tests.
Sal, I'm on policy too, so I'll help.
Perfect. Thank you. The other item is the calendars. And Dr. LaSousa, can you just refresh my memory? Because this has only been the 27th year I've been looking at these. What is the timeline that you need an answer on these? And typically we go out for vote. Teachers take a look at them. You put it out for a survey. I noticed one of these starts before Labor Day for the teachers, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
To be determined.
Yes.
No,
so
one of the
I understand
possibles.
that, but right now it's not allowed.
Why is it not allowed?
no, it's allowed
allowed.
if you select the calendar. It's allowed.
I thought the CBA said nothing before.
There have been a number of rulings in the past couple of years that the board has the sole prerogative to establish the calendar when it wants.
So they basically said the CBA is invalid because the CBA now says we can't do anything before September 1st.
Correct.
And in fact, many districts have already.
Yes, many districts
Oh, no, this is-
have moved in this
I'm glad
direction.
this is happening.
Yep.
I would say start school on the 29th.
All right, so
Sorry, I don't want to jump ahead.
yep.
Go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, in terms of the timeline, we would like to do this long before now, but we always have to wait until Menon Arena clears which dates we can hold high school graduation, because we're the third school in line after Morristown and the Morris County Vocational Technical School. So those graduation dates are set. We then built these calendars off of dates that are available to hold our high school graduation. And what we usually do then is you get a first look at them, first glance at them, and then we put them out to parents, and parents can kind of take a survey about which calendar they would prefer, their first choice, their second choice. Same thing with the Teachers Association. As you mentioned, the first two calendars that you have are pretty kind of standard. We start school for students 2 days after or 3 days after Labor Day. So if Labor Day is Monday, school doesn't start till Thursday. So that we can bring staff members in. But the third calendar has staff members coming in prior to Labor Day so that students would begin school the first day after Labor Day. And my own feeling is, and many other districts are moving in this direction, it would be better if we actually started students in school before Labor Day. I recognize that not everyone feels the same way, so that's up for discussion, but I think long term it would be better for us to bring students back a little bit earlier than September, maybe the last week of August, for example. And I see most districts moving in that direction over time, I think, is what will be taking place. So for your consideration, there's a calendar that does not do that yet, but it does have our staff come in so that we can begin students and the student school year immediately after Labor Day without waiting. A number of them are moving because they want to increase the amount of instructional days they have before AP and other testing. A number of them are moving because they already have a fairly large percentage of their high schoolers participating in a fall sport or in marching band or something like that, so they're back already, and they're going to practice and going to marching band camp, etc., but they're not in school yet. A number of them think that having students in school for a lengthy period of time after Memorial Day is not as productive as it could be if you got most of the year in prior to Labor, or more of the year in prior to Memorial Day. So
What do you think the value is bringing them back before?
all of the above.
All of the above. Okay,
Yes.
so you think there's value to all of those. All right.
I personally, I do. But I recognize there are other viewpoints and not everyone feels that way.
Go ahead, Michelle.
I just have a quick question about, so August 27th and 28th, that's a Tuesday and a Wednesday. So in terms of taking a look at those professional development days, would there be some flexibility? Let's just say that we had overwhelming support for what is this, calendar 3. However, that the staff who's most impacted with this change had some issue. Would they have, is there a reason you picked Tuesday, Wednesday versus Wednesday, Thursday? Or,
Yes, we chose Tuesday, Wednesday. Some other districts that I've looked at do it that way. They don't back right up to Labor Day weekend. And in some preliminary discussions I've had with staff members, a number of them demonstrated a preference to still have a lengthy Labor Day weekend
okay.
and have a little bit of a buffer so that you come back for a couple of days, but then there's another bunch of days off in case someone wants to go away for a long weekend or just decompress, et cetera, before the year begins.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mary.
I just had a quick question. I'm not familiar with this, but in the lower grades, do the K through 3 or K through 5 teachers come in that week anyway to set up classrooms, or no? Do they? What
a
is
lot of teachers come in.
A lot of teachers
before,
are
right, not,
physically
but they're
in their
not
rooms.
required to.
They're not required to, but they do come in to set up. Like, I'm just thinking the difference between affecting the high school group versus the middle school on down group. But a lot of the elementary teachers are setting up their classrooms that last week of August.
Many do. Many are in, at other points in the summer.
Got
I
it.
can't speak for everyone. It's sporadic,
Okay.
and no one is required to be here.
But they're not required. But a lot of them do, just to be prepared for the
Yes.
first day. Got it.
To last year, and we had to modify our spring break. Had we started school right after Labor Day, we would have bought ourselves 2 more days, and we would have had less significant impact on our spring break. And when we moved it, we're mandated to have these professional development days. So whether they're built into the calendar after kids start or before, I personally, I think prior to the start of school is a more optimal solution.
Agreed. Was there a concern in the past on a Friday graduation?
Yes.
I noticed there's one of these options is a Friday.
We have graduated on Fridays.
Yeah.
We try not to do a Friday,
Yeah.
but we've done it, and it's worked out.
Okay, and it hasn't caused too much issue with.
It hasn't caused too much issue, but it would probably be better
Yeah.
if we weren't graduating on a Friday.
Okay. That's what I remembered. I know we've had to do it, but if we could avoid it, we like to avoid it. Sabbath.
Sabbath for Jewish families.
Traffic, but Sabbath. I was more thinking Sabbath, but
Yes.
traffic too.
It's a religious
Yeah,
consideration.
if you observe it, sundown. Okay, so when will this go out to the staff and the parents?
We can do that by next week.
Okay.
At some point.
So let's see how the numbers float out, and then we can pick this up at our next meeting. Is that everybody okay with that? We'll see what the results are.
I was naive about, Mike, I was naive about the fact that we could do this start before September 1st. Is our teachers and your counterparties and the teacher leadership group aware that is now allowed?
I think so. That doesn't mean they're supportive of doing it, but
Okay, but
I think that
this is
they're
not going to come
aware.
out of left field. This should have been known and well versed, and
I've tried to be somewhat proactive in my communication
that's
so
fine.
that it wouldn't just come out of left
Alright.
field.
Westmore Center and Westmore Mendham backed up their school year about 10 days or 2 weeks last year.
Yes.
with students. Oh, students came back about 2 weeks early, and there was a tremendous amount of grumbling at the beginning, but toward the end, it seemed to be, better received.
Right. I mean, the benefit, of course, is you if you do it, you can either then have flexibility to put a February break in, which some people like,
Right.
or you can just end the school year much
Earlier.
closer to June 10th. And a lot of people like that because it's you start the summer earlier, but students can get to internships or summer jobs or whatever it might be a little
Right.
bit earlier than the end of June. So there are different viewpoints, there are advantages, and I'm sure there are some disadvantages, but
Sure.
other districts are heading this way.
Though instructionally, from an instructional standpoint, whether you're teaching kindergarten or AP economics, kids are going to come back to school more engaged than when they leave in June. You have a more willing participants from Memorial Day on. It's a grind. It is really hard to keep it going.
You see the beach now. Last 2 weeks of the summer are empty compared to what they were years ago because everybody's back already because of sports. And youth sports start.
Yeah, it's a
August
different
10th.
different than it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. I agree. So, I'm sorry, Mike.
I don't know what the options are. I don't know how people feel about this, but it seems like December 23rd, having an early dismissal on that day is kind of a waste of a day. Is there any options to make that a day off?
Yes, that is an
December.
option.
Can we look
Or a
at that?
full day.
Oh, I see.
Or a full day.
No,
Yeah.
no days.
Gotcha.
All right, you just have to find a day someplace else.
Yeah. You're right, though. There will be a high rate of absenteeism on that day. True.
Okay.
True.
Alrighty. So you'll put this out and maybe adjust calendar 2 and find a day other than the 23rd?
Yes.
Okay. And somebody checked it's 180?
Yep.
Okay. I know one year we got far down the line, it was the wrong count. Okay. Any additional board business? Are you guys good? No more new board business? Oh, go ahead, Mary.
I just wanted to thank the Shaw Lufbrow family for the applesauce. It was so good. That was a nice little gift that we received as a board at our last meeting before the break, and that was just very sweet of them.
Oh, thank you. Agreed. Very good. Thank you.
With cinnamon, without cinnamon?
I'm sorry?
With cinnamon on there?
With. There you go. You missed. You were here.
Did you warm it up or?
Isn't the Alabama game on?
I actually added it to my sweet potatoes when I had things,
So you didn't have anything to say about Park, but the applesauce you want to get into. I'm making fun of him too.
Applesauce is more fun.
Oh, jeez. Well, we have and don't escape. We have a very quick standing executive session for a student confidential student update. So we have our second opportunity for public commentary. Only going to talk about applesauce, apparently.
I won't talk about applesauce, and I will make it very quick. I'm going to repeat a comment I made at the last meeting and will probably be making at the next meeting. I would urge you to consider the impact that you are going to be having on the churches when you institute a pilot program. This is the camel sticking its nose under the tent. And when you start this, there will be no turning back, and I think that there will be substantial demand for this, and the impact that you have on the church's ability to operate will be substantial. So I ask you, they are members of the community as well, I ask you to consider what's going to happen. Thanks.
Okay. Any additional public commentary? No. Carol, are you about to rush up to the mic? Nope. Oh, nice. Seeing no additional public commentary, make a motion to adjourn into executive session. No action will be taken.
Second.
Okay, we'll meet in the little room.